Hope everybody's doing well today. This is the last part of episode 1 for the Awwwards rebuild. Now, unfortunately, I do have some bad news regarding this video. Bits and pieces of this video did come out a bit laggy. So as you're watching, you'll tend to see my screen just kind of freeze up for 3 or 4 seconds. And then it just comes back. I did have a lot of issues with this video and the previous video in terms of recording, and honestly I don't feel like re-recording it. Besides that, you should learn a lot here. Hope you guys enjoy. So now it's time to start animating the navigation menu. What we'll want to do is we'll want to go ahead and look for the header component. And so I'm in my styles here. If I open up components and then jump into header.js. Inside header.js is where we'll start defining the animations. What I'd like to do is import a few things. The very first thing that we need to import is navlink from React Router. And we also need to import with router. And we'll just set up from React Router DOM. What I also need to do is import the SVG for the up arrow. The up arrow I'm talking about is when we click open the navigation. This up arrow with the circle is what we need to import from the SVG. So let's go ahead and do that. If we open up our assets folder, we'll find an arrow left and arrow right SVG, but what we need is the up arrow SVG with the circle. What you can do to grab that is you can go to my master repo and then go to source assets and then up arrow circle.svg. In here, you can just grab the code and just simply copy and paste it in your assets folder. We can create a new file. And we can call this up-arrow-circle.svg. We can hit enter and we can paste the code that we copied from the master repo. Now that we have the SVG done, we can go ahead and import it. What I would like to do is import the SVG as a React component. So what I can do is write import React component as, and then we define the component name. In our case, we're just going to call it up arrow. And so we'll just import it from /assets/ and then we'll just write up-arrow-circle.svg. We can then just put the up arrow in the JSX. So I want to first know if I'm actually using this nav class. I'll go ahead and open up the header sass and let's search for .nav. So we have .nav right here, but I do want to change it because this is not a very great name for it. So go ahead and erase this right here, and what we'll do is we'll create a div called nav-toggle, and inside nav-toggle we'll create a div called hamburger-menu, and inside hamburger menu there will be 2 span tags for the lines that make up the hamburger menu. Now outside of the hamburger menu but still in the toggle, we'll want to create a new div and we'll call this hamburger menu-close. And inside the hamburger menu-close, we will then render the up arrow component, which is our SVG. Let's go ahead and save this and take a look at what we have. So jumping back in here, we can close out of the Git repo and we can close out of the final project. So you can see the up arrow is being displayed, but the hamburger menu isn't there. So let's adjust our styles. We'll want to change this .nav to .hamburger menu, and we'll go ahead and copy this hamburger menu. Go ahead and hit Ctrl X so that you can cut it. And what we'll want to do is write the nav-toggle class. And inside the nav toggle is where we'll paste the hamburger menu. Now let's style the nav toggle. What we'll do is we'll set the cursor to pointer. We'll set position relative. We'll select display and set that to flex. We want to justify the content to center as well as align items to center. We'll include a media query and we'll set it to less than or equal to a tablet. And what we'll do in here is simply add a margin right of 24 pixels. We'll want to copy this and paste it again and then change the device to a phone. And for the margin right, we'll switch that to 16 pixels and we'll also include a width of 20 pixels. Go ahead and save that. Next up we have the hamburger menu, and for the hamburger menu we'll just get rid of this media query and we'll leave it to where it says the width and the spans should be the same. Now as a sibling to the Hamburger menu, we do have the Hamburger menu close. So let's go ahead and get that written. We'll write hamburger-menu-close, and we'll just set this to an absolute position, and we'll put display none so that we could hide it. Now inside of this, we do have the SVG, and we're going to add media queries so that we can define the SVG. I'm going to go ahead and copy the phone and the tablet media queries and paste them in the SVG. And for the tablet, what I'll do is set the width to 56 pixels. And for a phone device, we'll set the width to 48 pixels. Okay, so let's save that. And I believe that does it for the styles. If we look at our project, we are back with the hamburger. And so when we click on it, nothing happens. But then what should happen when we click, this should go away, and then the up arrow should animate in. So let's start animating now. We can close out of header sass. We can also close this SVG, and let's start with the header.js. So what I would like to do is I would like to set up a state for our menu. We'll import useState from React, and we'll also need a useEffect for when the component mounts. What I want to do is I need to create our state. So I will just call this menu state and then set menu state. And the reason for creating state, it's simply because we want to know when the menu is opened. And then if it's opened or if it's clicked upon, we want to trigger a certain animation. So I'll go ahead and create a property in here called menu opened. And we'll set this to false because our initial state, or what this is representing, is the initial state, and we don't want the menu to be open, so we'll just label it as false. What we'll then do is bring in our useEffect, and what we want to check for when the component is mounted, we want to check if the menu state dot menu opened is true. And so if it is true, what we want to do is we want to run open menu animations, and then we can just put else. We'll return run close menu animation. So it's very simple. If the menu state when you open is set to true, we'll run the animations to open up the menu. If not, we'll just run the animations to close it. Initially it's closed, so it's just going to run the animation to close it. You'll also want to attach the menu state as a dependency. I'll do that towards the end of the video. What I'd like to then do is pass in some on clicks. The hamburger menu, we're going to do an on click. And what we're going to do is simply run an anonymous function that will set the menu state to true. So menu opened, and we'll set that to true. And we can copy and paste this for the hamburger menu closed, and we can simply set this to false. So this is a very simple way of manipulating the state between true and false, letting us know if the menu should open or it shouldn't open. So right now I would like to start animating. What I'm going to do is import GSAP, and I would also like to create a new timeline. So we'll do let TL equal gsap.timeline. And inside the useEffect, specifically the if statement, we're going to write our animations here. Very first thing I want to do is I want to set the navigation to a display of block. We'll do gsap.to, target the nav, and then we'll add brackets for the configuration, another curly bracket for the CSS, and then set the display to block. Now I want to check the display here in the Sass file. So let's actually look for styles, components, navigation Sass, and this might be commented out, so make sure that it's not commented. Just go ahead and leave it as display none, and when we click the navigation, we will set it to display block. We're going to do another tween, so just copy and paste gsap.to again, but now we're going to target the body, and we're going to set the overflow to hidden, so that when we click on the navigation and it opens up, we want to disable the scroll on the body. So here is where we're going to do the timeline. What I'm going to do is write timeline.to, and then we'll target the app class. The duration that I'm going to set is a duration of 1. Followed by setting the Y to 50 viewport height. And then for our ease, what is all this? And then for our ease, we're going to write ease expo.in out. Let's save that and take a look at what we have so far. As always, the animation will start, and then when we hit the hamburger menu, it should bring it down to a 50 viewport height. Now this works, and honestly it looks pretty good, but the issue that we face here is that when you're on a mobile browser, the 50 viewport height won't necessarily work all that well, as well as the fact when we can set a responsive design, when it gets to a device smaller than a tablet, we want to change this viewport height to 70 instead of 50. So what I'll do is create a ternary operator. This will also require us to import the dimensions. So I'm going to open up the app.js file, and then I also need header.js. So in app.js, what I'm going to do is I want to pass this dimensions as a prop through header. So we can do dimensions. It's going to take in dimensions, and we'll save that. And then in header, we will use destructuring to bring in dimensions. Now what we're going to write is dimensions.width is going to be less than or equal to 654. We'll want to set the viewport height to 70 viewport height. Otherwise, we're just going to set the y to a dimensions.height divided by 2. This will set whatever the height of the viewport is divided by 2, so it'll cut it in half. So now let's go ahead and save this and see if it's working. So it should still be 50 viewport here. All right, that's good. But what we want to happen is when we go to a tablet device or a mobile device, it should come down a bit. So it should be at least 70 viewport height. Okay, cool. The legal part right here is getting cut off, but I'm fairly certain that legal should have a display of none. We'll take a look at that here in a sec. Let's go to navigation SAS, and then we could look for the nav info. So this right here, we're missing an ampersand. Let's go ahead and add the ampersand. So we want the second and third child to have a display of none. Okay, cool. So we can see that it's working now. If I open it back up to a desktop, you can see that it's moving because it's updating the state depending on what the dimensions height is. Okay, cool. So now we can go back to our code and we can keep going with the animation. We can close out of app.js and go into header.js. Now what we'll do is attach a .2 to the end of the first tween that we created for the app. And what we're going to target here is the hamburger menu span. So let's do the hamburger menu and then span, and we'll set the duration to 0.6. We'll give it a delay of -1. We'll set the scale x to 0, and then we want the transformation origin set to 50% and 0%. This will allow us to scale the hamburger menu from the center. Finally, we're going to add easing. So what we're going to do is just ease expo in out. Now let's take a look at the animation, and what should happen is when we click on the hamburger menu, the hamburger icon should shrink and disappear. All right, perfect. So it's working just like we want it to. We're going to attach another .2. And for this one, we're going to target the SVG or the up arrow icon. Now we're going to target the path _1. And if we open up the SVG, if we go into assets, up arrow -circle, we see that the line, the path, and the other path have their own unique ID. So we'll target these specifically to create animations. We'll go ahead and add configurations. We'll set the duration to 0.4. We'll give it a delay of -0.6. Finally, we're going to add a CSS, and we're changing the stroke dash offset and setting that to 10, and then setting the stroke dash array to 5. Let's go ahead and save this and keep going. I'm going to copy this path 1 and then just paste it again right here. Make sure that there isn't any white space, so just attach it. And now we're going to change the ID to path 2. We're going to keep the duration and the delay the same. However, we're switching the offset, actually not the offset, but the dash array to 20. That's going to do it for the path to there. And then we can honestly just copy and paste this again and switch the ID to line_1. Duration and delay will stay the same. However, the stroke dash offset is going to be 40 and the dash array will be set to 18. Finally, for our SVG, we are going to copy and paste this one more time. But for the ID, we're just going to write circle. And we're changing the delay to -0.8 and the duration to 0.6. Here we're only changing the stroke dash offset. So get rid of the dash array and set the stroke offset to 0. Let's keep going. And the final animation we'll add is specifically targeting the Hamburger Menu close icon, which is the up arrow icon. So the class name we're targeting here is Hamburger -menu -close, and the duration is going to be 0.6, delay -0.8, and all it's doing in the CSS is setting the display to block. So let's save this and preview what we have so far. So what should happen is the hamburger menu should open up, the hamburger icon should disappear, and the up arrow should appear. So let's go ahead and click on it. Okay, cool. So we did not get that fancy animation for the arrow. That's because we're going to define that in the else statement. So if the hamburger icon is closed, we're going to set the initial state for these stroke dash array offsets and the stroke dash offset and the dash array. This allows us to play with the SVGs, widths, heights, you name it. All right, so it's a bit tricky because dash array and dash offset, I'll link an article to them on how to use them correctly. In our case, we're utilizing them just so that we could animate the heights and the widths of the SVGs, but this is not what they do. So the dash offset allows us to do sort of like a dotted line or a dashed line, and the dash array is sort of that space between them. So let's keep going so that we can continue on the animation. In the else statement, what we're going to do is write tl.to, and then now we're going to target the app. We're going to give it a duration of 1. And we're just going to set the y back to 0 and give it an ease of expo.in_out. Let's save this and let's check and see if we're able to open and close our navigation now. So if we select the hamburger icon, it will open. And if we select the up arrow, it should close. However, we need to bring that hamburger menu icon back so that we can reopen it. All right, so let's keep going, and we're going to attach another .to this timeline. And in here, we're going to target the circle. We're going to give it a duration of 0.6, a delay of -0.6. And then for the dash array and dash offset, I'm going to copy what we had up here. And then I'm just going to change the values. So the dash offsets is going to be set to -193, and the stroke dash array is going to be set to 227. So what should happen now is the circle around the icon should animate in now. All right. So if you saw that, it does the full circle and it does it back. It pretty much opens up and then closes. So let's go ahead and keep going. I'm going to copy this .to again and just paste it, and then just change the ID to a path_1. And the duration we're receiving for path_1 is 0.4. And the dash offset is going to be set to 10. And the dash array will be set to 10 as well. We'll copy and paste it again and change the ID to path2. Leave the duration as 0.4, delay will be -0.6. And it will also receive a 1010 for the dash offset and dash array. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this again. And now we're going to be targeting the line_1 ID. The line_1 will have the same duration delay of 0.4 and -0.6. However, we're changing the offset in the array to 40. So let's go ahead and change that. So let's go ahead and save this and see what we've gotten so far. So what should happen is the icon should now fully animate when we click on it. So let's go ahead and click on the hamburger menu. Perfect. So it does animate in and it animates out. Now we need to focus on bringing the hamburger menu back. So that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to do another .to, And for this one, we're going to target the hamburger menu close. And we're going to give this a duration of 0. And we're just going to set the display back to none. So actually we need to do CSS. And then inside the CSS curly brackets, we're going to set the display to none. This will hide that up arrow icon. And we'll also attach another .2. And this one's going to target the body. And honestly, if we're doing duration 0, we don't need to define duration. So we can leave it like this. We're going to target the body, and we're going to use CSS to target the overflow. And we're going to set the overflow back to auto. And we're going to do another .2. Now we're targeting the nav icon. And we're setting the CSS back to display none. So you can see that it kind of goes in this sort of reverse order in a way. So now if we take a look at what we've gotten, the animation loads. And then when we select the hamburger menu, it opens up. And then when we click the up arrow icon, it goes away. And the hamburger menu should come back, but it's not coming back. So it has a display block, but we aren't bringing it back. And let's take a look at why. So that hamburger menu is called the hamburger menu span, and I'm looking for it right here. So we have hamburger menu span, and it has this transform origin, and the scale goes to 0. What we need to do is set the scale back to 1. So I'm honestly going to copy this, and then before the hamburger menu close, I want to add that hamburger menu of the span to bring it back to full width. So we'll set the duration to 0.6. We'll give it a delay of -0.6. And we'll set the scale to 1, leaving transform origin 50, expo to in out. So now let's save this and see if we've got our hamburger menu working. The animation, which we've seen hundreds of times. Okay, we click the hamburger menu. The icon does come back for some reason. Okay. Oh, that's because I had put it back in here. So I got really confused in terms of where I am. So I have the if statement. If it's opened, we're going to run all this animation. Else, we're going to run this. So we need to copy what we just did and put it here between line _1 and hamburger menu close. All right. So let's take a look now. We've got the animation that loads in like always. And then we open up the hamburger icon and it goes away. Then we close it. The icon goes away and hamburger comes back. We click it again. Perfect. So it's working just like we want it to. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is when we open up the hamburger menu and select a link here, what happens is that the route changes, but the hamburger menu doesn't close by itself. We'll have to close it manually. So to fix this real quick, what we're going to do is we're going to rely on React Router. So at the very top, I've imported with the router up here. And what I'm going to do with that is wrap it around my export for the header. This will allow me to target different props from React Router. So let's copy the header and then we'll simply write with router and just leave it like so. Now, I also have this agency here that I need to change to a nav link. So let's go ahead and use navlink for the A tag. And this will simply be changed from href to 2, and this will take us home. We'll also want to pass in an exact prop. So just do that there. Now, the part that I'm talking about with the hamburger menu closing dependent on route changes, what we can do in the use effect is first we need to bring in history, and we're able to do that because of that with the router. What I'm doing here is I'm going to write history.listen, and I'm going to pass in an anonymous function, and all that's doing in this function is changing the state back to false. So I'm going to set menu state, and we're simply going to copy what is in our state already and just save it like so. Let's get rid of these two comments. So now if we take a look at what we have, and what should happen is when the routes are changed, the menu should close. So if we click on approach, There we go. So the menu does close. We're on the approach page. Let's go to case studies. We're on the case studies page. And if we open it back up, we're on the about us page. And if we take a look at how it looks like on a mobile device, we can just open up the navigation and then go to approach. That will take us to the approach page. Open the navigation back up, go to services. That will take us to the service page. Open the navigation up again. And yeah, so I mean, you're just going back and forth really now. If we click on agency, it would go back to home and then load up the animation for the home component. Perfect. So that's going to do it for this part in terms of creating the animations. Before we end the video, I want to take a few seconds just to clean something up. What I have here is the GSAP.2, GSAP.2, and then the timeline runs. What we could do instead is we could just have the timeline run at the very first animation. So we'll do TL.2 here, and we'll just attach the .2 there and get rid of this timeline on the app. Get rid of these semicolons, and then previously I've been able to just, get away with not adding a duration for my initial timeline, but for some reason GSAP has just been acting up on me and it's not really liking me right now. So what we'll need to do is just add a duration of 0.01 for the initial timeline. And then what I also want to do is, in fact, for this nav, actually, we'll just delete this display block because I feel like it's just a waste of time and effort. And for needing to set the navigation as a display block, I feel like we could just have it as display block all the time. We don't need to set it as a display none at all. And then if we scroll all the way down, we can get rid of this display none on the nav. Another thing I did, which I mentioned through the video, is to add the menu state as a dependency so that when the menu is toggled, it will require us to run this use effect. So the two things we did was get rid of the fact that we need to set display none and display block on our navigation, and actually go ahead and jump into your navigation SAS and get rid of this display none. Like I said, I just feel like that's just wasted effort and we can get away with doing this. But you'll still need to add the duration on the initial timeline. So go ahead and do 0.01. Now, if we preview what we have just to make sure that everything we did still works, we'll just refresh, the animation will load. And then if we click Hamburger Menu, everything seems to be working just like we want it to. If we select approach, the Hamburger Menu will close, switch to the approach page. And if we click the Hamburger Menu again, it will just open back up. Okay, perfect. So everything seems to work now. And honestly, this is going to do it for this series, creating episode 2, which will use Gatsby and most likely Framer Motion for the second episode of the Awwwards rebuild. Other than that, that's going to do it here for this series. If you did enjoy, please leave a like. I know that this video came out pretty laggy and I am super disappointed in that. It's really been a shitty week and I just wanted to push this video out as soon as possible. I know I waited too long, but I'm not going to re-record this. Again, like I said, you did enjoy this series, leave a like and look out for my next video. It should be good. You guys have a wonderful day.